Well, all right, everyone. It is noon Eastern time, so I am going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome to Jewish Fertility Foundation's panel conversation about surrogacy. My name is Rachel Lofspring, and I am JFF's chair of the board of directors. I'm also a fertility law attorney, and this means I counsel clients from the United States and around the world on family building through surrogacy as well as egg, sperm, and embryo donation. I practice in Ohio and in Illinois, and I also post about fertility law on Instagram at Rachel Offspring. Creativity, I know, bonus points on that one. But I do love connecting with folks in the community, so please connect with me and say hi. Today's Surrogacy 101 program has been organized by the Jewish Fertility Foundation. The Jewish Fertility Foundation engages hopeful parents by providing financial assistance, emotional support, and infertility education to those struggling to build their families. We are currently in 6 cities, alphabetically: Atlanta, Birmingham, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Tampa, and Washington, D.C. And we are expanding. In fact, I was just in Denver last week with the goal of raising the remaining money needed to open there, and I think we're going to do it. So today it is my pleasure to bring you a panel of surrogacy experts who have experience both professionally and personally. They're each going to introduce themselves, share a bit about their connection to surrogacy, and offer a piece of insight or advice as it relates to surrogacy. Panelists, I'd also love for you to share how those on the webinar can best connect with you. We will then have an opportunity to open the floor for questions, which you can send in privately by messaging Kayla or Lucy or myself. So with that introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Sharon. Oh, you're on mute.
Technology. I'm Sharon Lamoth, and I'm located in Seattle, Washington, although I was born and raised on the East Coast. Currently, I consult with intended parents and their chosen surrogates for independent journeys. I have owned my own agency before while living in Florida, and I moved to Washington State and have been, and when I moved to Washington State, the laws had not been favorable for paid or compensated surrogacy. So I assisted in helping change that law by actually going to Olympia, the capital, and testifying at least 3 times in front of the Senate and the House there. So it was a long journey, and in 2019, Washington state laws changed, and we have some of the best laws in the country regarding surrogacy. I've been a gestational carrier in the past twice. I gave birth to twins in 2000 and another set of twins in 2005. I think that having that experience plus my own, having my own children 10 years apart due to secondary infertility really has given me some insight as to all sides of the surrogacy process. I've been in this field for over 20 years. One important piece of advice that I'd like to share is before anyone starts a surrogacy journey, to have a full physical. If you're planning on using your own eggs and sperm especially, you should have a complete physical by either a fertility clinic or your own professional, doctor that you go to. I think that in all the years that I've been doing this, especially same-sex couples and singles don't take that step. They go directly to hiring an agency or finding a surrogate when they don't even know themselves if they need to go ahead and do the extra step of getting a sperm donor, an egg donor, or using donated embryos. So that's something really important. And some other things to consider before hiring an agency or consulting: ask the clinic for a list of qualifications that are acceptable in a surrogate candidate. That includes their age, BMI, number of pregnancies and C-sections, medical issues that wouldn't be acceptable, like gestational diabetes and hypertension, that's controlled by medication, premature births and things like that. So that really does speed up the process when you have those two boxes checked up before you even get started. One stigma I'd like to share about surrogacy, and I realize I'm talking fast, but we have a limited time and we have some great panelists. So I'll give you some information to get in touch with me at the end. But one stigma about surrogacy is that women who agree to become a surrogate want to or could keep the baby that they're carrying. And this is a fear of a lot of intended parents, but surrogates are only qualified if they can have their own children and they are parenting their own children. Therefore, they don't need anybody else's babies. They can make their own babies. And they don't need to have the whole, legal aspect of it hanging over their heads, fighting to keep your baby. That's why we have strong contracts in place. And when an attorney speaks, you'll be able to ask them that question too. Surrogates also fear being left with a baby that's not theirs, that maybe was born with a defect or something and the parents just walk away. Again, that's addressed in contracts, and that's very rarely, if ever, happens during the surrogacy process. Also, everybody goes through mental health evaluations, looking for signs of personality disorders or, some hint that they might have an issue with giving up a baby that they give birth to. So really, all of these very important issues are addressed, usually before even the match has even taken place. So those are some of the highlights, but surrogacy is a very complicated and long process, and that's why you need to hire professionals to work alongside of you and guide you along the way. It's really nice to have somebody that you can just call who's been in the field for a long time and just say, have you ever heard of this? Or how do I get around this? Or, who can I talk to help me with these issues? If you'd like to contact me, I'm on Facebook and Instagram under Sharon Lamoth, very, again, creative. And there's other ways you can email me, and you can go to my website, lamothsurrogacyconsulting.com, and you can email me through there. And I offer free consultations. So feel free to take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic advice. And I didn't know you did the Washington law for folks attending this webinar. That is not easy, getting a law to change. This is huge that it got changed and that you are part of it. So thank you, and amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Also, you mentioned mental health, which is the perfect segue to our next panelist, Dr. Feinberg. And Dr. Feinberg, for you, if you could please introduce yourself, share a bit about your connection to surrogacy, and offer a piece of advice or insight as it relates to surrogacy, we'd love to hear it. I'll turn it over.
Okay. Hello, I am Dr. Barbara Feinberg, better known as Dr. Barb. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I practice in Florida and Virginia and offer virtual services. I have a general practice, but I have a passion for reproductive support. I provide egg donor evaluations, sperm donor evaluations, surrogacy evaluations, and intended parent evaluations. And I'll be talking just a little bit more about those evaluations shortly. My passion for working in reproductive support is because of my own journey. And besides loving to reach out to people and helping them along the way, many years ago, I went through my own journey when reproductive technology was nothing like it is today. And so after a long, difficult journey, I ended up traveling halfway around the world to China, and I adopted a beautiful baby girl who was only 10 months old. And she is now in college in North Carolina. Unbelievable. So that experience and going through all of that has helped me really have even a greater feeling for people who are going through their own journeys and attempting to build their families. So I want to say, first off, I've known Sharon for a very long time. And I met her way back when she started a surrogacy agency when she lived in Florida, and just have the greatest respect for surrogates. I think amazing people who are willing to literally put their lives on the line for you, stick by your side for at least a year and give you what you most want in life. So I just want to say that. And now I want to talk a little bit about that surrogacy evaluation and what is involved. So there are 3 portions to the evaluation. They're all extremely important, and it's so important to not cut corners, not find somebody who is cheaper but maybe doesn't have a lot of experience, because so many things can go right and so many things can go wrong. And so the better prepared everybody is, the better off you are, and the more smoothly your journey can go. So my aim always is to help your journey run as smoothly as possible. So the surrogacy evaluation is very interesting. Surrogates need to be 21 or older. They need to have had a live birth, and there are other requirements. Sharon mentioned some of them. And when a surrogate will be meeting with me, they first fill out quite a bit of paperwork, so that I can get a thorough history from them that I will be going over with a fine-tooth comb when I meet with them. I want to assure you that should I evaluate your surrogate, I take it very seriously to make sure that everybody is on the same page, everybody can work together smoothly. That evaluation also consists of a personality test. I'm looking for stability, follow through, mental health, and somebody who is able to keep your baby safe during the journey. Very important. So I'm looking for those things through a number of different questions and discussions that we have. And I also am interested in the surrogate's philosophies on things like, what if something's really wrong with the baby? What would you want to do? What would they want to do? What are they willing to do? What if there's a C-section? Would they go along with that? How will they handle a miscarriage? Will they try again? What if through some miracle, but a scary miracle, they end up with triplets? What will happen if the doctor is interested in possibly reducing? How do the intended parents feel about that? How does the surrogate feel? So those are just some of many things that are discussed during that interview. The surrogate's partner is involved because this is a lifelong decision. And that journey can be very, very exciting, and it can be tough too. So the intended parent evaluation is something, it's kind of interesting to talk about. Some intended parents say to me, why do I have to go to a psychologist? I can't have a baby just like everyone else. And the reason is because there are so many issues, again, that can go really well and some that can be really difficult to get through. And so I want to make sure that you're prepared, that you know what kinds of things are fair for your surrogate to ask for example, what that surrogate may be going through. Do you want them in the delivery room or not? If there's a guy there, what would you like to do? How much contact do you want to have with this surrogate before, during, and after? So these are just some of the things that are covered in the IP or intended parent evaluation. And lastly, that joint meeting is very important. The joint meeting is with everybody involved. And by the way, these are all virtual meetings. And so with everybody involved, we can make sure everybody is on the same page. So one little piece of advice for you. These evaluations, all 3 of them, are extremely important. They're not all 3 always required, but I recommend them. I've been doing this for 26 plus years, reproductive support, and I can tell you that things run a lot better when you make that extra step and you go through this process. It's just a great idea. Find yourself an experienced psychologist or psychotherapist. Some people decide it's interesting and try it out. You want somebody who has a lot of experience and knows how to help you through this. I do allow people I've met with to text me with questions along the way, and I send resources just out of the goodness of my heart because I just so believe in this process and just am so excited about it. So that being said, I wish all of you the very best of luck on your journeys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Feinberg. I just want to echo what you said about the importance of the mental health evaluation and then having that resource available throughout the journey as well. It makes everything go so much smoother. And I love having you on here explaining that to folks.
Thank
I
you.
next want to turn to my good friend Marla, who's going to talk to us about the legal side and also her personal experience. Marla.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel. First of all, it's such an honor to be here. What brought me to surrogacy law is I actually went through years of infertility. So, I've been in many of your shoes, just having a very hard time getting pregnant, staying pregnant. So I ultimately worked with a gestational surrogate to have my twin boys. While I was going through that infertility journey, I really looked for so many resources, emotional support. I mean, the fact that the JFF offers financial support, I just think it's invaluable. So I'm super happy to be here. So as Rachel mentioned, I'm a reproductive attorney. I practice in Florida, and Rachel and I have had the great pleasure of handling many surrogacy matters together. We'll get into why an attorney in Ohio might be working with an attorney in Florida. We'll discuss a little bit of what state law applies in the process. But basically, you would interact with an attorney once you have a chosen surrogate, or if you're working with an egg donor, sperm donor, or embryo donor. Once the surrogate or applicable donor has had full medical approval from your IVF physician, and full psychological approval from somebody like Dr. Feinberg. As she mentioned, not all states require psychological evaluation. For example, Florida does not require it in our laws. However, it's extremely important. It's absolutely a best practice. And it's important that the full psychological evaluation take place of the intended parents, of the surrogate, and the joint session. So typically you do not want to start a legal agreement until you have both medical and psychological approval. You don't want to incur legal fees until you know you have that full green light. Another best practice, and sometimes required by state law, again, not in Florida, but certain states do require that each party has their own separate counsel. So for example, if I was representing the intended parents, I can't also represent the surrogate. That's why Rachel and I have had the great opportunity to work together, because everybody needs separate attorneys. And typically, most 99% of the time, the intended parents will pay for both lawyers. So for the surrogate's representation or the donor, egg donor, embryo donor, and they pay for their own attorney as well. So what goes into a surrogacy contract? Well, it's a lengthy document, and that's one of the reasons why it's super important that everybody have their own attorney to fully explain the obligations they're committing to. They fully understand the commitment they're about to enter into. It's a very important document. It goes into a bunch of different things, payment terms, confidentiality, how many embryos they're willing to transfer per cycle, how many times they're willing to try, what state law applies. So the general rule of thumb, there's a lot of intricacies to what state law can apply. The general rule of thumb to keep in mind would be typically is where the birth is occurring. Because where the birth is occurring is the law you really need to analyze for what the court process is to make sure that the intended parent or the intended parents will ultimately not have any difficulty being placed on the birth certificate. I would say most states have some form of a court process, not all. Some is more administrative, but it's very important at the beginning of the process, before you even have a contract, that an intended parent or intended parents understand the whole groundwork of what's to come as far as the legal process. You don't want any surprises. Will you have to go to court? Will your surrogate need an attorney for the court process? How long will you have to stay in the state of the birth based upon how long it takes to get the birth certificate and possibly getting your passport if you're an international intended parent? So the state law that applies is definitely something you should speak to with a licensed attorney in the state of where the birth is occurring. So that's the parentage process. And so, yeah, the contract just has a bunch of different things that go into it. Once the contract is fully signed, typically the intended parent's attorney will notify the clinic that they're all set. They issue what's called a legal clearance letter, and the parties can proceed with performing the embryo transfer. And it's good to keep in mind what your court process is, because there's usually a stage 2 legal step for the birth certificate stage. One stigma regarding surrogacy is a lot of people think that people just go through surrogacy because they don't want to go through the difficulties of being pregnant. They want to travel and drink and party. But that's so far from the truth. I mean, people come to the surrogacy process for so many different reasons. It could be same-sex couples and difficulty staying pregnant, just issues with your body, how you were born, and medical issues and psychological issues. So it's important that you, as Sharon was saying in the beginning, really have your medical evaluation completed, because in fact, some states, which Florida does require, we have a medical need requirement in our statute. So to proceed with surrogacy in Florida, either the couple can't physically gestate to term, or there'd be a risk to the fetus or to the mother. So people come to this process for so many different reasons, and it's important to understand medically, the basis of why you're proceeding towards this process. So I too give free initial consultations if anybody ever wants to reach out. As I said before, I've been through this process personally. I'm a huge supporter of any third-party reproductive technology, surrogacy, adoption. Any way people build their family is a beautiful thing. So to whatever extent I can help, please feel free to reach out to me. My phone number is 954-761-2929. And on my website at gmlaw.com, which is Green Spoon Martyr. I work at a large firm in Florida. You're welcome to email me as well. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Marla. And finally, we're going to turn it over to Leah, who is on our Tampa Advisory Council and also a mother through surrogacy. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say as well.
Thank you, Rachel. Like Rachel said, my name is Leah Spiro, and I live in Tampa, and I sit on the Tampa JFF Advisory Council, and have two amazing twin daughters that were born via surrogacy. Let me start by thanking Marla for all of that. She actually was the attorney I used for my surrogacy. I happen to be a contracts lawyer as well. So, I go into this thinking, hey, it's a contract, no big deal. Boy, was I wrong, very wrong. And Marla can vouch for it. The stuff she had to go through with me, I don't understand. Why are we writing this? How difficult it is to have to put things in about getting a life insurance policy on someone, the cost of getting maternity clothes, if they're twins, that it costs more, things like that, that I was just in shock reading a contract and trying to understand what we were going through. So beyond invaluable, and how important having an attorney is for this. And she was amazing. I'm going to walk through why I used a surrogate and everything that happened briefly. I have MS, and therefore, as Marla said, Florida, there are certain reasons. I was under the assumption that I could have a baby, not a big deal. I'd go off my meds, would be great. Until I went to Johns Hopkins. I went to Johns Hopkins to meet with a neurologist that specialized in MS, and they told me how that was not a good idea, what it could do to me, all these things. My mom went with me to this, and we flew to Maryland for this appointment. We left the appointment crying that the idea of having children, having a baby, becoming pregnant was not anything I could do. I couldn't have kids. What was I going to do? We went to the airport hysterical, talking about it. The option was really surrogacy, and how am I going to make this happen? She got on a plane. She flew back to South Florida. My plane was delayed. I sat in the airport waiting in the Southwest line, ended up crying hysterically to a poor random couple who got to hear everything about what I was going through, and got home and started the process, started researching, started looking into surrogacy. What are my options? What do I need to do? How is this going to happen? So went through everything. I hired an agency to walk through, help me find a surrogate. At the same time, I started going to a fertility clinic, walking through everything, getting tested, did everything I needed to do to get this to work. I ended up being matched with a surrogate, but all the while doing all the fertility stuff, having the eggs, having the embryos made. I actually ended up having embryos, had them tested and made sure they were the healthiest they could be before a contract was done. I knew that I had 2 embryos, and I knew if either took, I'd have 1 or 2 baby girls. I had 2 girls. I knew that was what I'd end up with. So I knew this before I had a contract in place. I got matched with an amazing surrogate in South Florida. I'm in Tampa, so that kind of was perfect. I grew up in South Florida, which made it even better. My went through the whole process. We met, we got along great. Everything worked out well. We signed the contract. Thanks to Marla, got me through that whole thing because I was a nightmare and I look at contracts all day. So that was just beyond me. And went through everything, got very lucky. They stuck, they both stuck, and I got very, very lucky. She picked a hospital in Boca, which was also incredibly lucky because that's where I grew up. And so I got to go to appointments with her when I could. She and I made an amazing relationship. She went into labor early, and I'm on the other side of the state. Thanks to my parents being there, I was able to call and get them to the hospital. So my parents actually met my children before I got to, because they were there. I was driving across the state to get there, get to the hospital and meet the girls. It was an absolutely amazing process. My Suro and I talked all the time. We texted, we called. She came over here so I could meet her children, so they could understand everything going on. We stay in touch. She'll ask permission if she sees a picture on Facebook to share, because people ask, and I'll say, yeah, of course. And, you know, she went ahead and did another journey. A year later, she asked my permission, which is probably not normal, but that's how close we bonded. If she was okay, if I was okay with her doing it. It's your body, of course. I would love you to help other people. She did it. 2 years to the day and minute my first one was born, she gave birth to another little girl, which is probably the craziest thing to ever happen. You know, my girls, like I said, they were born early. Thankfully, because they were in Boca, I got to live at the house I grew up with while I went to the hospital every day to see them. It was an incredible journey, an incredible process. We went through, you know, there were ups and downs. There were things that, you know, going to doctor's appointments, things that they ask, all of it was just it's overwhelming. But when you know what the end result can be and what you get, and what I got are 2 amazing little girls that are now in kindergarten and have known this whole process from basically the beginning. I mean, when they start asking about bellies, I told them there's no secret in my house about it. They know that mommy couldn't carry a baby and that they were in Megan's belly, and they will tell you, and they'll tell anybody that. And to me, you know, if there are questions, because I know people worry about, you know, obviously adoption and things, well, are they going to be concerned that there was something because you didn't have them in your belly? I see it as my children see it, how badly I wanted them, how important it was for me to have them, that how special they are, that look what mommy did to have us. Mommy is our mommy. There is no question about that. Gestational surrogacy is amazing. They're mine. They're 100% mine, but I needed to use somebody else to get them here. And they will tell you, and they will say her name. They know it's Megan. And it was an incredible journey for me and my girls.
So moving. There's a note in the chat that says crying. Thank you for sharing, and I feel the exact same way. What a journey, and truly thank you for sharing that with everybody. I am now going to turn over to questions, and I'm seeing 2 themes emerge. One is expenses. So what I think might make sense to do is perhaps Marla, Dr. Feinberg, and Sharon could share a little bit about expenses on the legal, mental health, and then Sharon, I think you'll have a great perspective kind of overall as well that maybe you could share with everybody. Marla, do you want to maybe, yeah.
I mean, the expenses thing is obviously a really important question, also an equally difficult one to answer. There's so many factors that go into what the price of surrogacy can be. It depends. Do you already have your embryos created? Are you starting from scratch? Are you involving an agency to help you find your surrogate? And do you need any donated genetic material? So those are all things that kind of add into the budget. And then it really, like, as far as what a surrogate gets paid, that number really depends on, well, one, is it a self match? Like if you're working with a surrogate who's a family member or a friend, sometimes the compensation the surrogate receives is not as high as it might be if the surrogate's working with an agency. And typically surrogates who are repeat surrogates or have surrogacy friendly health insurance get paid a little bit more than, let's say, a first-time surrogate or a surrogate who has health insurance that does not cover the surrogacy process. So I know that it's not an extremely helpful answer and such a typical lawyer to say it depends on the price, but it really does. And I think Sharon could get into, just from the agency, the matching perspective. She's much more on the ground with the beginning to end on the pricing.
So picking up from there, I give people an overall expectation of between about $130,000 to $180,000 all in. Excuse the poker term, but basically it also matters where your surrogate is located. West Coast tends to be a little higher than East Coast. Just saying that. I am currently on the West Coast after having my agency in Florida, and it totally was a wake-up call. Included in those prices, currently, you'll see the average surrogate, first-time surrogate. And when I say first time, I mean somebody who actually has given birth for themselves, but they haven't been through the surrogacy process. So it's around $50,000 plus what many call as a benefit package, including, I think Leah mentioned, maternity clothing, there's housekeeping, there's lost wages, there's insurance. I can give you the list. You can talk to me about the list. The list is long, and the list is included in the contract. So there's no surprises. Let's go back to the agency. Agencies are getting anywhere between 18 and the average agency, 18 to 32,000 to do a surrogacy journey, matching, case management, the whole nine, allowing you to choose your own professionals to work with, but they can guide you to best mental health person, clinic if you need it, attorney if you need it, and so on. So I can also do that, but it's if you don't have someone volunteering to be your surrogate, your sister, your cousin, your best friend, and you are going to start from scratch, I'm not looking for surrogates. Agencies will, and that is a big part of the process. They vet them. They oftentimes screen them through a mental health professional, the first step, and then the next steps are after the match. So when you put all of these moving parts together and a pregnancy, which is, we all know, around 40 weeks, oftentimes the contract says 3 IVF cycles, because it's not guaranteed that the first IVF cycle is going to stick. It could be the second or third time. That also boosts your price up, the cost, because you have to start at square one as far as the medical part is concerned. You have to start with the meds again. You have to, it just lengthens the whole thing. And the longer things go, the more expensive it gets. But even at if you have to use all 3 of your cycles, top being around 180. If there's a miscarriage in there and you have to start totally all over again, that boosts the cost up. talking about babies and money is very uncomfortable. This is why you really need somebody, an agency, a consultant, somebody in between there to soften that communication. Because no one wants to equate this process with selling babies. And when you look at the negatives out there that people who are totally against surrogacy for religious reasons or whatever, they bring that up. And this is not what that is. The money that surrogates earn, and then I'll hand it over, but the money that surrogates earn for this process that they can use in whatever way they want, but they usually use it toward their family situation, whatever it can be, anything from putting a down payment on a house to, family vacation, whatever the case is. That money is for all of the appointments they attend, all of the education that they receive, all of the time they put into the process. It's not something, you might say, oh, pregnancy comes easy to them, but having a baby for someone else and all of these appointments, going to Barbara, going to attorneys, going to the clinics multiple times. It's not like having your own baby. And most of all, keeping that communication open with the intended parents. You're talking to them, you're texting them, you're letting them into your life. And although you might enjoy all of that, it does take time. It takes time, and it can take 2 years to have a baby from start to finish, depending on what the scenarios are.
I have some things to add.
Oh, good.
And thank you, Karen. That was very thorough. I don't have a whole lot to add to that. Did a great job. So the psych eval actually is the cheapest part of your whole journey. It shouldn't be, but it is. And it's just so important. So I'm going to, Marla, kind of steal your word, it depends, but then I'm going to get a little bit more specific just because it's easier with what I do. So it really does depend upon the type of surrogate that you use. If you use somebody who's a sister, a cousin, your best friend, the costs oftentimes are so much less expensive with some of the things that Sharon mentioned. Sometimes I cry as I listen to these people who are willing to give up so much of their time, their bodies, not to mention their family time, wear and tear in their bodies. And they just say, no, I just don't want anything. Well, like, can they at least pay you if you miss work? No, that's okay. I'm good. So, it varies greatly to somebody who doesn't know you, somebody who is doing you this amazing favor. It's just, you can't put a price tag on it. So that will be more expensive because they don't have that emotional tie initially, although many surrogates get very, very tied. Many of them want to know what happens to that baby later. So just an aside, but in terms of my cost, so we're talking about all 3 evaluations. The surrogacy evaluation lasts, believe it or not, that interview is 1.5 to 2 hours. And then there's a report, which I've known as Miss Speedy Gonzalez, because they always go out in 2 to 3 days max, usually same day. But that report, then there is that intended parent evaluation, which is so, so important. And then there's that joint evaluation. So when we add all of that together, and again, we have to think of known versus not known, because a known surrogate, believe it or not, is a lot more complicated. There is so many more things that I need to go over with that person. So we're talking somewhere between 1,200 and a couple of thousand, usually on the lower end of that. So 1,200 to 1,500 is usually where it runs for all of your evaluations, all of those reports. That's 3 reports that go out. So that's about what you can expect from my side. Now, those will vary greatly, though, as you call around. So again, focus on how you feel when you talk to that person. I'm always willing to talk to somebody a little bit, to an intended parent. I feel for them. They're scared, and I want to comfort them. And they have every right to learn more about who I am and my experience. And so check around, see cost versus how much knowledge and experience that that person has. By the way, I did leave out how to get in contact with me, so I'm going to quickly say that you can look up my name and you'll find me on the internet, but I do have a website, and it's www.drbarbcares.com, DRBARBCARES.com, and you can email me right through the contacts page. And if you have a pen handy, you can text me directly. Don't call this number. It's for only for texting, 813-789-2941. Either way, best of luck.
Perfect. I think I'm going to have one more quick question on cost, and then I'm going to move it to a different topic. But Marla and Leah, you both had twins via surrogate. And so there was a question, how does that impact the cost within the contract?
Yeah, well, within the agreement, there's certain payments that are tied to certain benchmarks in the pregnancy. Like, so for example, the surrogate has her base pay, whatever it may be. I mean, Sharon mentioned, roughly starting at around $50,000, which can fluctuate greatly depending on where you're doing the process. However, if they're carrying multiples, there is typically an additional payment that is paid typically throughout the process, throughout the pregnancy per multiple. So that can range anywhere between, an additional $5,000, $10,000, really just depends. And taking one huge step back, doctors really are not advising double embryo transfers. Leah and I did this at a time when they still said, be careful, it's very dangerous, but okay, we'll do it. Now I'm finding, and I think the group likely agrees, that many doctors just won't even do it now, absent extreme medical need or the quality of the embryo. So it's important that if you are wanting to do a double embryo transfer, your clinic supports the double embryo transfer. It is very important that you're matched with a surrogate who is also okay with the double embryo transfer, because they're all very educated. They read the different support groups, and not all surrogates are okay to do 2 embryos. So I digress a little bit, but that's an important thing I want you to keep in mind. If you're thinking of a double embryo transfer, not all surrogates are okay with it. So there is a fee, an additional payment to the surrogate if she's carrying multiples. I mean, of course, all this is negotiable too, but typically, like with an agency surrogate, there is that fee. You do also have to keep in mind that intended parents are responsible for any uncovered medical expenses the surrogate incurs from the pregnancy. So, everybody does their best to ensure that the health insurance the surrogate has covers pregnancy, but to the extent something is not covered by the policy and it's pregnancy related, the intended parents will be paying for those uncovered medical expenses and a certain amount of recovery after the baby's born. Additionally, typically with like a surrogate that's working with an agency with twins, they're typically having a C-section, and there is an additional payment made to the surrogate for the C-section. Now, remember, these are not just payments to her. These aren't, it's not like she's an employee. This is like for what she's putting her body through. Carrying twins, Lee and I both saw it, how challenging that was for the surrogate. They're going through so much, and there's also a very high likely chance that she could be put on bed rest, which is another payment term that goes into the contract if she has to suffer lost wages, childcare, or housekeeping. That will all be addressed in the agreement. And so I could turn over to Leah with her insights on twins and the expenses. Although it's all worth it, it was all wonderful.
I mean, basically everything Marla said. There were a few odd surprises for twins, extra cost for more maternity clothes, which shocked me. I mean, you're pregnant. I didn't understand the difference there, but a little bit more on the cost of that. They do, end up on bed rest. Mine did. And there was the cost of making sure everything was taken care of. Got very lucky with her health insurance, but the twins, there was an additional cost for carrying twins. And I know that she was all on board. Next time she had no desire to carry twins. She said it was our special thing. So her next two, she would not agree to twins for anybody else, but there was an additional cost. In the grand scheme, it seemed minimal in comparison to the cost of everything as a whole, but there was a little bit more of a cost to it as well. I didn't give my info, my name. You can find me on Facebook. I think at the end there'll be phone numbers and emails as well. So That's the easiest to find me.
And on the topic of twins, that was an intended parent's perspective. Sharon, having been the carrier who carried twins, would love to hear your thoughts on it.
So I have to say my very first surrogacy was for family friends in Florida. And I did get compensated as well on top of that, just because at the time I was living in New York and I had to do a lot of traveling we did everything in Florida, including the contracts and the birth. This is not recommended now. Just want to say that flying around while you're pregnant, especially with twins, is not, but I got pregnant in 1999 and gave birth in 2000. And our contracts and the whole process started in 98. So we're talking a long time ago, where they transfer 3 or 4 or 5 embryos at a time. And in my case, it was 3, all 3 took. And by the grace of God, one of them did not develop into a 3rd baby. So I ended up giving birth to twins without any extra compensation or C-section fees or anything like that. The world has changed and we just have to move forward with that process. However, back to giving birth to twins though, it really is different from carrying a singleton. There are a lot more health issues. You're more high maintenance at that point. The fees that are associated with a twin pregnancy usually kick in after 3 months. I don't know about the other contracts here, but usually it's after 3 months because you don't know if you'll have a miscarriage or some other thing, issue that will happen that will make this twin pregnancy not viable. So everybody is really concentrating. The cost for extra fetuses is important because there are more appointments involved. There is a lot of stress involved. There's usually stress tests involved at the end. To the 2 moms here that have had people carrying twins for them, you must totally understand. I mean, it's heightened to the nth degree when you have multiples. Honestly, when people want to have twins on purpose, I dissuade them. I really do. There are people who want to use 2 surrogates at once who can financially do that, believe it or not. I try to persuade them to wait at least 6 months after your first surrogate is pregnant. After 6 months, start the process for the second surrogate, because you do not want to be the one deciding which delivery room do I want to be in while these surrogates are giving birth. But also there's the personal thing. Surrogates want to have a relationship with their intended parents. They don't want to be second best. They don't want to share, the process with another surrogate. They really want to they're doing this for themselves, selflessly, and they want to have that experience of being part of your birth story, not part of a crowd of people giving birth at the same time. So that's something to consider. I mean, I would have felt that way too. It really is a special moment as a surrogate to give birth to twins. I feel like it's like double the blessing. My second couple was a Jewish gay couple. So they had a lot of things that they wanted me to do or asked me to do for them. I'm not Jewish myself, and I did the best I could to accommodate what they asked me to do for them. And I feel like surrogates really do try to accommodate what their intended parents want from them, including diet, including not getting their nails done because we're afraid of fumes, or getting your hair colored for the first few months, or those kinds of things. Those are things that don't necessarily show up in the contract, but are conversations that are had before the birth. What expectations intended parents have. I hope I answered the question.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I wanted to ask Dr. Feinberg a question because this came up in the chat, and I think it's a really beautiful question. So I'm going down the path of needing a surrogate, and I'm thinking about a few different friends to ask. How do I do that? What does that process look like? Oh no, she's freezing. Is everybody freezing?
Back.
Okay, good.
I don't know what was happening. What a special question. And I've seen this happen numerous times. Um, you know, I would say the most important piece is to make sure that the person that you are asking never feels compelled in any way. So oftentimes people ask relatives or dear friends, and that person knows about their journey already. That's the person they feel so close to and have confided in, but that's not always the case. And so I would suggest first off saying and making sure nobody else is around. It's a very personal thing to discuss, but saying, if you haven't told them, I would like to share with you some things that have been going on with me. And I want to be sure that when I tell you these things, that although they may pull at your heartstrings, I want to remain very respectful of your needs, your individual needs. So after I tell you my story, I would like to ask you something. And it's very important to me that you feel that you can take all the time that you need to think about it, and that you stick true to your heart, no matter what that answer is. Really important introduction. And then to share your story with that person. They need to know why you're asking them to do something just amazing for them. And to keep it not too terribly long, just the highlights of what kinds of things have been going on and your strong desire to have a child. And then to say, I'm wondering if you would ever consider caring for me. Whatever that answer is, it's absolutely okay. And I'd like you to really think about it and possibly even talk to somebody like me, talk to a psychologist who specializes so that you know what it is that you're getting into, possibly talking to Sharon or Marla, Leah, getting some more information before they make that decision so that they understand before they just jump as your best friends and say, oh, yes, of course, which is a common thing with somebody who loves you and wants to be there for you. So again, moving slowly, gathering information and leaving room for that.
Can I add one thing
I was
here?
just going to ask you.
Those are awesome points. But another thing is, before you even consider asking someone, no matter how much you feel like they'd be a great surrogate, I'm going back to my bit of advice, go to your clinic and make sure that you have that list, because if your friend, family member, cousin, church, friend, whoever, doesn't fit into those parameters, then everyone's going to be disappointed if she ends up being, she says yes, and she's not the right age, or she hasn't had a baby before, or her pregnancy, which you may not know about, her pregnancy may have been difficult and you didn't even, she hadn't really shared all of those little details with you. So you want to make sure that you're asking someone. Also, you might not know that she's on anxiety medication or some other kind of medication. You might not know that she's having some medical issues. So you have to really think about all of those little nuances, and having that list from your clinic will really help you, guide you to the right person to ask to, or to avoid.
Great. I want to turn this over to not a religious discussion, but when somebody comes to you about wanting a Jewish surrogate or having a Jewish surrogate, what that can look like. What could be different in those situations than when it's a not Jewish surrogate?
I totally understand. I've had people ask me, how do I find a Jewish surrogate? I want somebody that respects my religion, who follows, our holidays, who knows, the ins and outs of my expectations for a pregnancy. I feel like I definitely have to find somebody else who can help that person, I'll send them to an agency that specializes in the Jewish culture, because that's not me. I can help them with everything else, because the basics, the finances, and the professionals involved in all of that. But I really feel like there's some extra support. I would send them to other professionals who would be able to guide them better, like Barbara, guide them better than I would. Having said that, finding a specific religion or culture to carry, person to carry that baby is hard. You're narrowing down. Already surrogates are scarce. A good surrogate, a good qualified surrogate, it's hard. There's already a waiting list for people looking for surrogates. And the more your wish list, the longer it is, the longer you're going to wait to be matched, no matter what. You could be one of the lucky ones and have someone right in your circle, but for the most part, it is a lengthy process already. And if you're looking for someone who's vegan or vegetarian or lives in your hometown or even your state, and and on top of that, Jewish or Catholic or, whatever, it narrows the window and it lengthens the time. So just keep that in mind.
And Marla, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add on that.
Yeah, to echo what Sharon said, I see it from personal experience that when intended parents are specifically looking for a Jewish surrogate, it exponentially increases their wait time. So if that's something that is absolutely a deal breaker to you, just factor that into your budget for time, because it will add to that. So that's a Jewish surrogate or a Jewish egg donor. Sometimes the egg donor is what intended parents really are focusing on for the genetics. And I'm not a rabbi, but I do think there are so many different opinions on what makes a child Jewish. So I would suggest you speak to your own rabbi. That's something that I did when I was going through this process, because I think your own rabbi has their own perspective on what makes your child Jewish when you're going through third-party reproductive technology. As far as the legal aspect, when I represent religious Jewish couples or individuals, they want to include certain things in the contract. For example, it's super important whether or not their surrogate is Jewish or not, that the surrogate keep kosher. So, and Rachel and I have actually had matters together where we've had contracts involving Orthodox Jews where we had to address everyone's comfort level with how to best put this into the agreement. Now, keep in mind for anything that goes into the contract regarding diet or health precautions or medical decisions, as much as we say the surrogate will do something in the contract, ultimately these decisions are really hers to make. A judge is never going to force your surrogate to eat kosher meat. And it'll be very hard to actually file a lawsuit against her. So, and it's weird hearing this from an attorney, but a lot of this comes down to trust. You have to trust that she's going to do as she's saying in the contract, because no one's filing lawsuits over what she's eating or how she's, observing the Jewish faith. So it's important to have these discussions at the beginning, at the Dr. Feinberg stage of the psychological evaluation. Are the parties seeing eye to eye with the diet? I know another important thing within, the very Orthodox Jewish community is confidentiality. A lot of people, and I saw this myself when I was involved with Jewish support groups, is a lot of people don't talk about this with members of their community. It's for whatever stigma or reason. So, not just can the surrogate share this journey with people, that the confidentiality that goes into the contract, but how should the intended parents talk to their child on how they're born through third-party reproductions? That's more of the mental health concerns. So there's a lot of different things that go into the contract when dealing with Jewish surrogacy and the preferences of the parties. But it's really, at the end of the day, just that, preferences that we hope that everybody respects, because it would be a very difficult thing, if not impossible, to actually enforce with a court judgment and recovering money for something like that.
Thank you. And JFF is actually going to have a podcast episode on this topic in 2 weeks. So you can tune in for more on that. We are getting close to 1 o'clock, so I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for joining us today, to thank our incredible panelists. You have been wonderful. I hope the information for those joining us has been helpful, has been informative. Please complete our post-program survey. This will let us know how we did today and also assist us with future programming. It should be in the chat, and we will also be emailing it to you. And that email will also have our contact information. I know that there were questions we didn't get to today, so you now have contacts for folks in the field that you can reach out to. Thank you again for everyone, and I will sign off.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful.
It was great.
Thank you.